All right, we are live. So I'm here with Venice, aka Lady Valor, and this is. Oh, wait a second. Now I think we're actually live. So
Perfect.
if we were live a moment ago, which I guess we'll find out after the fact, then you're going to hear this twice. But if not, good morning, GM. Happy holidays. It is 11 o'clock on the West Coast on December 23rd. I'm here with Venice, aka Lady Valor. One of my favorite people in the Macaverse community and a talented writer and creator in her own right. And she sent me an email, I don't know, a week ago, maybe a couple weeks ago. I don't know, maybe a couple months ago. Time is a black hole at this point. But asking about, how to find comic artists for comics projects. And so I thought, this is something that a lot of people end up kind of thinking about or dealing with, and it might not be a bad idea to just have this as a conversation that could benefit not just what she's trying to make, but also anyone else that's trying to put these pieces together, trying to create comics projects. And frankly, a lot of what I will say about this, applies to just about any kind of creative project. So just to kick things off, I mean, Venice, do you want to say a little tiny bit about yourself? And then I think maybe the first place to go as a little bit of orientation around this is, what is the project? Because, very much the nature of the project is going to help determine where we want to look and who we want to find to become the kind of visual voice of this thing.
Yeah. So, as you said, I'm Venice, Lady Valor, and I'm technically a poet who decided they wanted to try and write, I don't know, just a story, not so confined. And I looked around and decided that a comic medium probably would be more up my alley for my patience level. And so I've created a couple different ones. And the one, there's like, let's say 2.5, 3 that I have just been sitting on because I've been looking for an artist. One of them, I'm not sold on the name right now. It's changed like 40 times, literally. And that's okay though. But um, it's kind of like one of those disaster movie style slash mystery stories. These friends are basically they stumble upon a myth, a long lost myth, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with the world around them because suddenly everything is starting to fall apart. Volcanoes were becoming a thing all over the place, tsunamis taking out towns, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
That's one. Another one, it's kind of a Deus Ex-esque comic
Okay.
about cyber peoples fighting.
Cyber people's fighting sounds like the tagline. It's good.
Yes. Deals with, I don't know, yeah, just cyber people.
Okay.
They're trying to gain or the humans actually are trying to gain their freedom.
Yeah.
From these cyber god dudes. And wow, what is the other one? I just forgot what that was. Well, there's another one. It's kind of an in between. Oh, it's a much bigger story. That one, Calamity.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Oh yeah.
probably the first one that I kind of started really writing about, and it goes into a whole bunch of different genres. But the first one, it's kind of like a setup to the town of Calamity and the mysteries that lie within it.
Yeah.
Someone goes missing, and there's just a bunch of little mystery pieces that are, strewn about to try and just set up the rest of the stories to come.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Awesome. So you've got a few different genres to play in, which actually is kind of helpful in this pursuit. If you, let's say you knew, for example, that, Calamity was really the one that you were, focused on and wanted to find someone for right off the bat, then, if that were the case, or if that was your only series, then I think the way that I would approach that is you would be finding people and looking for, artists that feel like they could kind of fit that style or the world or the genre. But since you've got a few to play in, I think the other way to go, if you don't necessarily care about which one kind of, pops off first, let's say, then I think you could also approach people with like, hey, I'm working on a few different series. One is this kind of, sci-fi story about cyber people fighting, and another one is a little more realistic and is a little more grounded in reality. And then the third one is, I don't know, what would you say the genre for Calamity is?
We'll go mystery thriller for like the first.
Okay, perfect. So then third one's kind of mystery thriller, also kind of like normal people present day, or is there a genre element to that as well?
Yeah, it's definitely normal people. Just regular people trying to live their lives.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think that's important to kind of orient yourself around as you start to look for the right people and reach out to people. Is kind of what genres are you looking for stylistically? If you have something in mind, and I think there's kind of two things to think about when you're starting to approach people. One is, I think that especially new comics writers and people that are trying to put their first projects together sometimes have a tendency to kind of limit the scope of the people that they approach and talk to about their projects. I think I've certainly seen sort of a unnecessary cap on, for lack of a better way to say it, kind of the quality of or the caliber of artists that people may sometimes try to approach or try to talk to. So I would say number one, eliminate that and really try to find who are the people that you could actually really see, really becoming your creative collaborators in building these worlds and telling these stories. You're looking for people that have strengths in the particular areas that you feel like they need those strengths to tell the story. So if you've got a lot of complicated, conversation, relationship kind of dynamics between characters, then you probably want to look for people that are really good at delivering emotion, that have, a range of ability to communicate, expressions and, facial reactions. And, there are some amazing artists who I love, and I won't name any names, but, who are incredible at action, but maybe not so good at, really having unique characters. There's a very famous, incredible, Marvel artist who, when you take the hair away, basically all the characters look the same. And so, you want to try to kind of identify like what's the criteria, for these different stories, and then that'll help you kind of hone in on who are the people that you want to reach out to, for these different stories. And so again, like, is it more important that they can do big action sequences and choreograph something that's really dynamic and dramatic, or is it more important that they can really nail these character moments and beats, which is going to really serve the story the best? And of course, ideally you're finding someone that can kind of cover everything, but I think it's important to kind of think about what's the most critical creative piece that is going to get delivered here. And then the other thing, and I'm going to screen share in a minute to kind of look at a couple of the ways and places to go about this. But the other thing I think is worth thinking about up front is, what's your pitch to these artists? Because I think there's an element of this process, especially as you're sort of getting these first projects off the ground, where you've really got to sell them to some degree on why do you want to spend the next, several months of your life, let alone whatever, setting aside whatever kind of contract or deal you make with them. What's the fun, creative part of this that's going to have them want to spend time invested in, especially with a new project, not just illustrating the story itself, but also developing and building out the world that the story takes place in. And so I think you as the creator and as the writer, you want to be able to go to them with, as much as I love, cyber people fighting, that could be your start because it's kind of a fun way of, catching someone's attention. But then I think you want to be able to articulate in writing, like what's cool about this story? Where does it go? Why do you want to engage in it? And I would be looking for a few sentences to a paragraph that you can kind of send out as the hook or the pitch to, why is this so cool and why are you excited about it, which hopefully is going to help, someone else get excited about it. As much as I love us as writers, I also think it's really important to keep in mind that the majority of the heavy lifting, just as far as, ultimately kind of time put into the creation of these things, does come from the artist side. So I think, we have to, in my opinion, be conscious of and very appreciative of, those people that do buy into these stories that we want to tell, because just the amount of time required to make them is a little disproportional, even though, I would not say the contribution to the final product is necessarily more heavily weighted one way or the other, but I just think the time equation is unquestionably more on the artist side. So anyhow, that's kind of some initial things I think as creators, we need to kind of wrap our heads around. How are we pitching this to people that we want to potentially collaborate with? And then, you don't have to necessarily tell me numbers, but do you have in mind, the other big question, of course, is going to be timeline and budget. So, do you have a specific time frame in mind for when you want to get the first one started, when you want to get the first one finished? And do you have, kind of an available production budget, for the artist? And if so, kind of what the thinking around that is. Are you comfortable sharing any of those thoughts at the moment?
I would like to have one done,
Mm-hmm.
and ready to try and let people read. Uh, I guess around this time next year, so
Okay.
I have like a
Yeah.
long. I'm not like super like tight because I want it to be not rushed and
Yeah.
just be. I just want everything to be right this
Yeah.
time around. Um, budget wise, uh, just not exuberant. Um,
Yeah.
yep, let's start with that. Um, otherwise, if someone says that they like some crazy number, as long if I think the quality's there, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I really like this, then I would do what I can to budget for that around that, or see if we can come to some sort of lesser agreement. But
Yeah.
I would definitely try and make that happen. So
Yeah.
I'm more kind of open.
Okay. Yeah. And those are other factors to kind of consider as you go into this search is, what is the budget that you have in mind? Because it's going to be one of the first questions that people, ask is, what is the budget for this? For traditional comics, that's basically going to be a page rate. And just to give, you may already know this, but for anyone that's kind of thinking about this, like general ranges, anywhere from, let's say about $100 a page up to, $300 to $500 a page, depending on who the artist is. And, are they going just to maybe pencils and inks, or are they going all the way to full color? You can find some people that are a little less. You can certainly find people that are more, but there's a huge range there. So, I think it's good to know going in kind of what the page rate is that you feel comfortable with. And then, if you've got some flexibility around that, then, just be prepared for that kind of negotiation process a little bit. That also brings up the notion that, like, as you're going to artists, you're not just necessarily thinking about one artist that's going to go start to finish, although in my personal opinion and experience, it's, kind of my favorite artists to work with are the ones that do. It takes longer for them, but I love it when you're getting kind of one person that can really take it from start to finish. For a lot of our projects, I feel like that gives us the the best results. But in traditional comics, it's very normal for there to be someone that's, kind of doing the initial penciling. Sometimes there's another person who's doing the ink line, ink work on top of the pencil art. And then very often, there's someone else doing color, and then someone else doing lettering. So you're kind of looking at ultimately a little team of people, unless you do find someone that can kind of do all of it, or most of it. So I think the biggest trade-off is time. So if you've got a 12-month window, then you've got plenty of time if it's ideal to find one person or a couple people. If you're trying to move quicker, then that's generally the reason that you might have a separate colorist, for example, is that then the person that's doing the line art can move on to the next episode or issue while they're handing things off to the colorist, and then the colorist can hand things off to the letterer, and so you get this kind of like whole production cycle going through that process. So I think that's a bit of preamble. Any thoughts or questions around any of that at the moment?
At the moment, no.
Okay.
That part I was pretty familiar with, so
yeah,
kind of flexible and just prepared there. I also just like the more people you have, like in my opinion, sometimes it's the more risk you're taking of somebody possibly falling through. And so I also just like to have
yes,
just one person.
I think that's personally my preference as well. Although we have done some stuff working with other colorists, and sometimes that does work really well. I definitely think finding someone that can at least do pencils and inks is good. Often you do need a separate letterer. I do find that while there are artists who are truly kind of able to take it all the way to the finish line, lettering really is its own specialized skill set. And so unless an artist has really spent time kind of honing that craft, you're generally going to get a better result with another person who's doing the lettering work. And those guys, lettering is usually very reasonable and actually much easier to find good letterers than it is to find good available artists sometimes. And so that's the other factor in here is, budget, time, their schedule. I think as I was talking about not prejudging who you reach out to, sometimes I find that people hesitate to reach out to people that have a big social media following, or that have done what we consider really high caliber professional work for Marvel or DC, or for film or television, or people that may initially seem like, oh, why would they want to work on this indie project? And my feeling is always, if you think they're the right fit for the project, it's worth having a conversation. And there have been several times where even if it wasn't that person, they've been able to recommend someone else or pass it on to someone else in their network or circle. So I think, at this early stage of kind of finding the right people for this team that are going to create this thing, you really are, in some ways just kind of networking. And I think that's the approach that has served me and Macroverse the best, is just trying to cast to some degree a pretty wide net for those that I think could really be the right fit for the particular projects that we're putting together. And then sometimes you'll find along that path kind of a counterintuitive approach. So quite honestly, like Frank Calico, who does the artwork for Darkland, I absolutely love, and it ended up being a match made in heaven, but he wouldn't have been the obvious choice for that series necessarily. But there's something about his style with Eben's material that just makes it, kind of brings a whole new dimension to it in a way that I could not be, happier about. So I think it's all these kind of factors going into it. And then at the very end of the day, the number one thing is you want someone who can deliver the caliber of work that you want to, put out into the world, that can meet deadlines and, actually get this thing done. And that's going to be a fun collaborator, someone that you can really, work with and have a good time with. So I'd say those to me are the most important factors. And remind me at the end, I want to kind of circle back to, what do you do when you've got someone who says they want to do it, but then isn't actually doing it? Because I've certainly experienced that as well. So, there's no magic bullet for this, but, I think that my approach has been like, you set aside a few hours and you kind of just go on an artist, kind of a look around the web in all the different places that, you find great art. So Instagram is one of those places. And so, if I were looking for someone for a particular thing, and actually here's Nicholas, who is illustrating the Bushido's comic series to great effect. Hey, we didn't see this. That kind of looks like a Halloween Bushido, if you ask me. Very cool. So, Nicholas was somebody that I connected with through Behance, and we're going to look at Behance a little bit, but, just incredible artist. And, after a handful of conversations, he came on board to do Bushidos. As we're trolling around here, again, just kind of what I like to do is just come in, and if you're not following a bunch of comic artists already, that's a good thing to start with, and just kind of letting the algorithm put people in front of you that you might want to follow, give people hearts and likes. You're kind of just building little relationships as much as you can. I'll also go in, and like Dan Mora is someone I've been a fan of for a long time, and we haven't done a project together, but he's someone that we would like to do a project with at some time. So also we'll just spend some of this time giving people some hearts and flowers and saying like, hey Dan, great work as always. So there's nothing I have specifically in mind for him at the moment, but I think all these little things add up to, people kind of starting to see you and recognize you. And then when you are going to reach out to somebody for a specific project, you've also just got more relationship with people. I don't know why some of these things. So I don't know. Should we preface this as a not safe for work stream now? I'm not sure. So, Instagram, Twitter, I like to go into like the comics hashtag. What I like about Twitter, even a little more than Instagram in some cases, is that you do tend to find people that are a little maybe more on the indie side potentially. And I think for a lot of these projects, you kind of are looking for great talent who maybe isn't as busy or in demand, just yet. So, as you go through and kind of find people that might be a good fit, they're easy to DM and say hi to. So, Twitter is a good one. A lot of people may not realize ArtStation. So ArtStation is primarily there's a lot of game artists and production artists on ArtStation, but you can also, search for comics and find all kinds of incredible people on here. We found one of the artists who did all of the key art for the Creepshow episode that we directed off of ArtStation, and several other comics artists that we've had do covers and other things have kind of come through finding portfolios that we felt like, were a good fit here on ArtStation. Kickstarter is also a really interesting place to look, and especially for new comics projects, as you're kind of getting these first things off the ground, there's a whole comics and illustration tab on Kickstarter. And so what's interesting about looking at Kickstarter is you get such a range of different styles and people that are in different places in their careers. And, again, I won't give my personal opinion about kind of like, different artists' levels of talent, but it runs the full gamut from people that have been, in the game for a long time to the very first project that anyone has ever done. And so what you do know, looking at people that have got especially successful Kickstarter projects, is that in general, these are people that have been able to deliver some amount of work. So Kickstarter's requires a little more digging, but if you find like, oh, I love this art style, I could really see this applying to, one of the projects, for example, then you can kind of figure out, who is this artist, find them on one of their social media channels and then message them, directly, through one of those channels. So it's, you're kind of sleuthing and digging to try to get some artist dates, essentially. And finding people that, again, you feel like could be a good fit, but also hopefully have some demonstration of ability for being able to deliver something. And then Behance is the other one I think a lot of people don't know about. So Behance is Adobe's portfolio site. We found a lot of amazing artists on Behance over the years, and just, again, really runs the gamut. But as you find interesting artists, you can look a little more at their portfolios, and then I love this, actually follow. I'm not logged in, of course. Oh, I never understand, like, well, I guess I do understand, but the default is to sign to create a new account as opposed to log in. I don't know, that user experience doesn't feel quite right to me. Anyway. Anyhow, so there's Behance is great for like being able to really see a more full portfolio, and you can kind of go to someone's page and get a range of their work, and then there's messaging built into the platform as well. So I am already following Leo, so yeah, love this stuff. Oh yeah, forgot about these guys. Yeah, so big fan of this guy's stuff. shout out Leo Chiola. So you just basically are looking for anyone that you think could be a fit for the project. And then Webtoons is another great place. Oh, just happen to have Darkland up here as well, so if you're not reading Darkland, check it out on Webtoons. But Webtoons is another good resource for looking for artists for a couple reasons. One is you may decide that Webtoons is a good place to launch your project or to have it be part of your launch strategy. And then the other thing, which is part of what we're actually trying to solve at Macroverse, but it's just the reality, is that a lot of the artists who are working in Webtoons Canvas especially really are doing it for the love of doing it. And there's not a ton of money for most Webtoons Canvas artists. So again, this is one of the things we're trying to solve and address with what we're building at Macroverse. But there are people that are looking for paid comics work in the Canvas category that are great artists and just haven't yet found the like really actually paid gigs, because even some that have big followings or what seem like big followings, they may be just too busy doing their own comic, but they're often not making a ton of money off of Webtoons. So some of those people are very happy to moonlight for something that is going to bring some more cash into their creative enterprise. So another good place to potentially find and connect with artists, again, takes a little more kind of sleuthing to sometimes find where to get connected with them. There's not an easy way to do it within the Webtoons platform, but hey, these guys have a Patreon, so that might be an avenue to connect, or being able to figure out this is a writer and artist, so if you wanted Heikism, if I'm saying that right, you could probably find, they actually have a couple of socials, so there's a couple ways to connect with this person, for example. And then the final one is just good old-fashioned Google. So what I have done less of in recent years, but have certainly done in the past, is science fiction comic art, and you'll again kind of find your way into different portfolios or different collections, and then can kind of track down contact information for these people. So those are all the different ways that I've had success finding artists. Actually have found a few on LinkedIn as well over the years. So I think it's, I think that the main message here is just using all the social platforms to identify and then connect to artists that you think are a good fit for the material. And again, I would say not prejudging, whether or not you think they're, I guess my fear is I don't want people to think like, oh, these guys are too good for my project. Like, I think, believe in the project, approach everyone you think would be good for it, and let them be the ones to say whether or not they're interested in it. So I think that's the screen sharing portion of all of that. There, it seems like there should be a more magic bullet answer to this, but it really just does take some time to kind of find, connect with, communicate with, kind of sort out details around the different projects with the different artists that you end up working with. And so I think, to be fair, like I would allocate a good kind of, 5, 10, 15 hours just for kind of getting in touch with people initially. And then, that'll kind of cast as broad a net as you can for people that you really think could be a good fit for it. And then, you basically got some back and forth in DMs and emails and, different communication platforms to start to find, who are the people that really might be interested. And then the hard part, which we've also had to deal with, and this is the good problem to have, is when you've got 3 or 4 people that actually seem like they'd all be great for it, and they're all available and they're all willing to work within your budget. And then, how do you figure out which one is the right person? So for me, it always starts with, this kind of process. If it's not someone I already know, obviously, if it's someone you already know, you can just go directly to them. But if you're looking for somebody new, it starts with this process of reaching out. And then what I like to do is I am going to work with this person for months. I don't want to just have a text or email or DM relationship with them. So, we've had a couple of those, and a couple of them have worked out just fine. But my strong preference is to then move from yes, we're all interested in working on this together, to, a face-to-face Zoom call, so that, we can kind of get to know each other a little bit, get a sense of personality, talk a little bit more about the creative side. What do they see? What do we see? And I think in my opinion, at least, like, you want to really feel like there's a good fit on all those different levels, because this is not just a work for hire gig. This is a creative partner to, bring this thing to life. So let me shut up there for a second. Venice, how does all that strike you?
That strikes me really well. It helps a lot. Most of what I've found are the actual work for hire, and it's not the greatest experience, to be honest. Yeah. These are all good tips. Actually, I didn't even think of checking Kickstarter for an artist, other than maybe this is how I'll pay them.
Right. Well, they've told the story a few times in different places, but the team that does digital pools, so Matt and Alex, Alex was the writer. He came up with this world, had kind of been going through the process, and ended up hitting up Matt on, I believe it was was either on ArtStation or on what's the other one, DeviantArt maybe. And very much this process of like, pitched him the series. They ended up meeting, I think perhaps in person in their case, and then we're able to kind of come to what's now been a multi-year long creative partnership. And I love that that kind of work spouse is kind of the ideal scenario here, because you're not just trying to do a one-off thing. You're trying to make something that you're proud of, that they're proud of, that you're both kind of emotionally and creatively invested in. And so I think it's worth going through the time and effort to find that right person. more than it is of just like, I'm just going to pay someone to make some comic pages. And sometimes that's fine, but generally I think you want these to be long-term working relationships that can ideally turn into something more down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not as much fun when it's just a gig for somebody.
It's really not. It's like, oh man.
So I think maybe just to get a little more into the nuts and bolts of at least my own, what I've found to be successful is I'll generally reach out, and anyone that I've done this to will now know kind of what the strategy is. But it's like I like to reach out, and I will say I'm only ever reaching out to people whose work I really genuinely do love. So like I am not looking for someone just to like check a box or get something done. Like I'd rather get it done slower than not get it done really well. And am looking for people that want to be genuinely creative collaborators with us. I think we approach the way we work with artists very much the way that we work with actors or any other collaborator, is that it has to be a meld of everyone's input. Best idea wins. We want you to think of stuff we never even thought of before. If something doesn't make sense, please flag it. Like you want this to be something where the sum of the parts is makes a greater whole at the end of the day. So I will usually start with a message that's something like, hey Venice, huge fan of your work for, I've been following you for a while, huge fan of your work, especially if I have been following them for a while. Or sometimes it's like, hey, just came across your profile and, OMG, amazing. So, it generally starts with some kind of compliment. And then, I'll say, hey, I'm putting together a new project. I think you could be absolutely perfect for it. Would love to figure out a way to connect and chat about it. What's your schedule look like over the next week or so? So there's a few things going on there. One is like a compliment of some kind. Let them know that this is a legitimate job or an offer to make something. I should also say I will also always say in there, I'm putting together a new project. This is a paid job or a paid project. Would love to schedule time to talk about it. So I think people, especially artists who are really talented and in demand, get a lot of people that are just trying to get them to do stuff for free. And so I think you want to immediately kind of separate yourself from that side of the world and say, even if it's a low budget, you don't have to say that up front, but like there is some money attached to this proposition. You unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh no, I muted to cough.
Oh, gotcha. So sweet, simple message to start with, and then asking for an actual action. So, can we set a time to chat or connect over the next week or so? Some people won't respond at all, but those that do will generally come back with like, hey, thanks for reaching out. Sometimes you'll get the like, appreciate it, but I just can't even think about anything for the next 67 years of my life, which is great. I usually kind of make a little note to circle back with them later if I want to. Or sometimes if I really am, if it's really someone I would desperately love to work with, I'll sometimes say like, totally understand, when's a good time for us to reconnect, when might you have a little time in your schedule? Or in our case, sometimes we'll say, okay, totally understood. It's good that you're swamped. Do you have any space over the next several months where maybe you could fit in a cover or, some other piece of something that's a smaller scale, for example. So, you kind of have all those different things to kind of play with depending on what you want to accomplish. But starting short and sweet with a request for a next step, and then from there, like often there'll be a message or two to kind of clarify what is the basics of what's the story. And so keeping it pretty high level but something that feels enticing. So thinking a little bit about what is that kind of 3-sentence version of the story that makes it, sound fun and interesting. And again, I think largely, why do you like it? Why do you think it's fun and interesting? And then, I often like to say something again, which is genuine, but also, intentional, to say like, I think you could do an unbelievable job with this, and would be, thrilled to, work with you on it. And so then once we've kind of got those initial kinds of couple of messages out of the way, and they have expressed some interest in kind of going on from there, then that's the point where I, try to set up a Zoom call or something that we can actually talk and kind of get more into the details. If I've got any kind of concept art or, anything else I can share, like that's something else I would do if we can set up that Zoom call. Just give a little more of what I'm thinking. And then, I think part of that in-person conversation is really about, what do they see here? And so, you really genuinely want to know that. And if it's someone that you want to work with, you want to start to draw them into, having some attachment to what this is. So the more you can kind of engage them in that process, the more likely they are to kind of go like, I do like the idea of this. Here's what I would do with it. Here's how I would approach it. And once you kind of got someone going down that road, then the chance of them being more inclined to want to play just goes up. So, I think from there, then it just gets into the nitty gritty of like, okay, let's do some sort of a contract. I would always do some sort of a contract for somebody that's doing a longer term project. So, just basics of deliverable time, money, agreement on rights. That's the other thing we didn't talk about. If your budget is lower, then, if you're especially going after kind of a higher profile artists, be prepared to talk about, some share of rights and, profit splits and those sorts of things. And I think that's all very fair if you're asking them to kind of reduce their rates and to put their creative heart and soul into it along with yours. Then ultimately being partners on it is not such a bad thing. That's kind of how you get there. And then once everybody's signed on, getting into actual production is a whole other conversation. Thoughts on all of that?
No, that's also all good to think about. I know I need to look up various contracts. I never actually looked at one for a creative before, so that is on my list of things to thoroughly research.
Well, just because you're in the club, so to speak, just let me know. Shoot me an email if you want us to, but we can share one of ours with you as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
it'd be amazing. So I mean, with that, and like I said, jumping into production, I had to have this happen more recently. Did you want to circle to okay, I found the person, and they're not actually necessarily doing what they should be doing, or just vanished? Like, what's the thing?
The ghosting thing is just the most frustrating thing ever. So we've had that happen a few times too. We're just like, why? I don't understand. But I think, to me, it all comes into a very, I'm about to say hard learned lesson, but I'm not even sure I've fully learned this lesson. I know what the lesson is, but there have been too many times over the course of my career, not just with comics, with other projects too, where you get into, this concept of like sunk costs versus, headaches around what's actually happening. So I think, at least for me, what happens is, whether it's time or money or, whatever the different elements are, where it feels like I've already invested a certain amount going in this direction, it's not working, but hopefully there's a path forward to get it to work. And I can't actually think of an example where that's actually worked out. So, I think the truth is, I think if you haven't found that the relationship is working, that you're getting what you need in a reasonable time frame, and especially if the person is, has long absences, isn't responsive, like, the only thing I found that has worked, and this has only worked once, is to the first 1 or 2 times where that happens, immediately kind of get back together in person or on Zoom, or find some way to like reconnect. If you can actually do that reconnection and they're willing to do it, then I think you have to have that kind of very frank conversation, which is like, hey, like, I'm really committed to getting this done. This is the time frame. You said you could meet that time frame. It doesn't look like you can at the moment. Is there something going on? Do you want to bow out? Like, is this something you actually want to do? Because I think you very quickly need to get to, like, is this person going through some, family emergency, or there's something going on that you don't know about? Or are they actually just not into doing it? Or, are they a drug addict? Or, who knows, whatever extenuating circumstance there is. So I think it's just, it has to be something that happens quickly, because otherwise, and again, I've allowed this to happen several times where it's just like, okay, well, we were supposed to be at 8 pages done and we've got 1 page done, and they say they're working, please let them be working. I don't want to have to go start over, or I've already paid for an episode or 2 and now they're flaking out, and if we had to go back, do we need to start over from scratch? And in retrospect, every single time when I've done that and when we've done that, it would have been better to just go back to square one, bring somebody else on board and start over. There's one animation project in particular where, the not kicking off the person, not letting that person go, like, really actually cost us way more in the end than it would have had we pulled the plug and gone back to square one, even though we had 20% of the project done at that point. So it's a tough call, but I think there are times, and I would say now sooner rather than later, where unfortunately it's like, if it's not working, it's not working. And frankly, if it's not working for you and it doesn't feel good and you're not having fun and it's not creative, then like, why do it? Trying to make something cool here. So everybody get on board or get off the train.
For reals.
For reals, yeah. And it sucks, but I think that's the deal.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess, unless you got any other thoughts or questions, that is kind of my advice on how to find an artist. It's not, again, it just takes some legwork and a lot of reaching out and, kind of back and forth and, kind of being willing to put yourself out there a little bit. And I think, the other fun benefit of that process, if you take it on this way, is it is a chance to just get to kind of meet people and know more people in this community of comics creators and artists in general. And you just never know where those things are going to lead. There really have been times where it hasn't been the person I reached out to, and they, introduced me to somebody that was absolutely the perfect person, or that, a year later, it ended up being something that we did, we did something else together. So you can never have too many of those awesome artist relationships kind of ongoing and at whatever level. And, especially for someone like you that's making multiple things, you just never know where those things are going to connect.
Really? Okay. No, yeah, this has been really helpful. Like I said, I didn't think of a couple of those avenues. I really haven't dealt with Behance at all. So I'm definitely going to take a look there.
I'll also say the other thing that I've found with Behance as a nice place to connect with people is, I think a lot of people don't get hit up there a ton. Like, I think, Instagram is great, but there are, people that are looking for artists. Like, I think that is probably one of the main places that they, get DM'd. So you may kind of get lost in the shuffle there. Whereas I've had a lot of success with Behance as far as just being able to get in touch with people and getting responses from people, whether it's worked out from there or not.
Okay. Well, I will definitely take a look at that and actually get I have little pitches for each of them, like kind of written up. They're just never where I need them, such as on my phone for whatever reason. So I need to get everything in one spot at least that I can access from
Yeah.
wherever, and just
And I would just keep it text to start with, like truly just like a few sentences. Like, I think your first message especially is really just to like, hey, is there any world where you're interested in this? And then you've got more after that. That's great. But I think you want to just give people a quick read that's compelling, that ideally solicits some kind of positive response from those that it could be good for.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm excited to get that going.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being willing to have this conversation live. I hope it's helpful for other people as well. And let's go find some awesome artists to make great stuff with.
Yeah, let's do this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And of course, hit me up if you have any other questions or if anything else comes up.
Always.
Always. All right. Fantastic. Have a wonderful holiday to anyone watching. Have a wonderful holiday and a happy new year, and lots more to come. Cheers, everybody.
Ciao.